Barron Trump never expected his afternoon drive through Washington, D.C. to turn into something life-changing. It was supposed to be a routine outing, a quick stop for coffee before heading home. But as his car idled at a red light, something caught his attention. A middle-aged man stood on the sidewalk, holding a worn-out sign that read, "Losing my home. Anything helps." His face was lined with worry, his clothes neat but worn. Unlike most people who hurried past, Barron found himself staring. There was something different about this man. Just as the light turned green, an impatient driver honked behind him, forcing Barron to move. But as he drove off, the image of the man lingered in his mind. He had everything: wealth, privilege, opportunity, and yet here was someone who had lost it all. Later that evening, as he scrolled through the news, he couldn't shake the thought. He clicked on a local story about rising homelessness. His heart pounded as a familiar face appeared. The same man from the sidewalk. His name was James Carter, a former small business owner who had lost everything after a series of financial disasters. Barron closed his laptop and made a decision. He had to do something. The next morning, Barron told his security team he wanted to return to that street corner. Dressed casually, with only one bodyguard at a distance, he approached James, who looked surprised but wary. "Hey, I saw you yesterday," Barron said, offering a warm smile. James hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I appreciate you stopping." They talked. Barron learned that James had once owned a small furniture store, but a series of unfortunate events, medical bills, a failed investment, and a recession, had wiped out his finances. His home was in foreclosure, and within days he'd be out on the street. Barron listened intently. This wasn't just another sad story. It was a harsh reminder that life could change in an instant. Then Barron asked, "If you had a second chance, what would you do?" James sighed, glancing at the street. "I'd rebuild, start small, get my business running again. But I don't have that chance." Barron nodded. "Maybe you do." Barron sat at his desk late into the night, poring over everything he could find about James Carter's past. Old customer reviews, local news articles, business records, everything pointed to one thing. James had once been a respected business owner. His downfall hadn't been because of bad management or laziness. It had been a series of unfortunate events that could happen to anyone. Medical bills, economic downturn, one bad investment, and suddenly everything was gone. Barron knew he couldn't just throw money at the problem. That wasn't a real solution. James needed a way to rebuild, to stand on his own again. The next morning, Barron called James and asked him to meet at a small cafe outside the city. When James arrived, he looked hesitant but hopeful. He was no longer wearing the same jacket Barron had first seen him in, but his eyes still carried the weight of years of struggle. "I have an idea," Barron started, sliding his laptop across the table. On the screen were designs for a revamped furniture store, complete with a financial breakdown and a potential location. James squinted at the screen, confused. "What is this?" "I want to help you start over," Barron said, "but not just by paying off your debt. I want to invest in you, a real business deal." James blinked in disbelief. "You mean, like a loan?" "Sort of," Barron replied. "I'll cover your mortgage so you don't lose your home, and I'll fund the reopening of your store. In return, you'll pay it back over time, not just to me, but by helping others in your position." James hesitated. "And if I fail?" Barron leaned forward, his voice firm. "Then we figure it out, together." James exhaled sharply. "Why would you do this for me?" Barron smiled. "Because I believe in second chances." James swallowed hard. "Then, let's do it." For the first time in years, he had hope. The journey to rebuilding James's business was anything but smooth. Nothing came easy. First came the paperwork, piles of legal documents, bank rejections, and skeptical landlords. James's past financial failures followed him like a shadow. Even with Barron's backing, getting a lease for a new store location was an uphill battle. One landlord scoffed at the idea. "You expect me to rent space to a guy who lost his last business?" James clenched his fists, ashamed. Barron, however, didn't flinch. "And I expect you to know that everyone fails before they succeed." After weeks of negotiations, They finally secured a modest but promising storefront. But that was just the beginning. Then came James's biggest hurdle, self-doubt. One night, as they sat in the empty space that would soon become the new store, James sighed. Maybe this is a mistake. Barron frowned. What? James ran a hand through his hair. I lost everything once. What if I mess this up again? What if people don't trust me? Barron leaned back. Do you trust yourself? James hesitated. Barron continued. You know how to run this business. You've done it before. The difference now? You're not doing it alone. James exhaled slowly. Yeah, I guess that does make a difference. As the days passed, the pieces started coming together. Suppliers took a chance. Customers began to show interest. The dream was becoming real, and James, he was finally starting to believe in himself again. The morning of the grand opening felt different. The sky was clear, the sun cast a golden glow over the city, and for the first time in years, James woke up with a sense of purpose rather than dread. At 6 a.m., he was already at the store, wiping down counters and adjusting displays. The smell of polished wood filled the air, a scent that reminded him of the first shop he had ever opened. Barron arrived soon after, dressed simply in jeans and a button-down shirt. He had no interest in making this about himself. This was James's moment. You ready? Barron asked, stepping inside. James exhaled. As ready as I'll ever be. A small crowd had gathered outside, some curious onlookers, others old customers who remembered the first Carter's furniture. Among them was a young couple, whispering excitedly. That's the guy I told you about, the woman murmured. He used to own the best furniture shop in town. James peeked out the window, his nerves kicking in. What if no one actually comes inside, he muttered. Barron chuckled. Trust me, they will. At exactly 10 a.m., James took a deep breath and turned the closed sign to open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door creaked open. An elderly man stepped inside, running his fingers over a wooden chair. James immediately recognized him. It was Mr. Dawson, one of his very first customers years ago. I still have the dining table you sold me, Mr. Dawson said with a smile. It's been through 3 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases, and 1 nasty storm, but it's still standing. James's chest tightened. Well, let's find you a chair to match, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And just like that, the store came alive. Customers streamed in, admiring the craftsmanship, placing orders, reminiscing about the old store. Local news crews arrived, cameras flashing, as Barron quietly stood back, letting James have his well-deserved moment. But then, something truly unexpected happened. A woman in her 40s walked up to James and placed her hands on the counter. Years ago, after my house burned down, you donated a table to my family. We had nothing, but we had that table. It was where my kids did their homework, where we ate together, where we rebuilt our lives. James blinked, speechless. She pulled out a check and handed it to him. $5,000. I want to pay it forward, she said, to help someone else who needs a second chance. James stared at the check, then at her. Tears welled in his eyes. Barron, watching from the side, simply nodded. The cycle of giving had begun. Months passed, and James's store not only survived, it thrived. But it wasn't just about selling furniture anymore. His store had become a symbol of second chances. One evening, as James wiped down the counter after closing, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Barron. Just made my final mortgage payment. I own my home again. Thank you. Barron smiled at the message before replying. No, James. You did this yourself. James sat down, staring at his phone, overwhelmed. He had gone from a man ready to give up on life to a man who had rebuilt his future. But the real surprise came a week later. A reporter from a major news outlet reached out. His story had gone viral, a struggling businessman who got a second chance and paid it forward. They wanted to do a feature on him. Barron chuckled when James called to tell him. Guess you're famous now, he teased. James laughed. Guess so. But fame wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the impact. Inspired by his story, other struggling business owners began reaching out. They wanted guidance, mentorship, hope. So James started a program, one that would help others like him get back on their feet. One by one, he helped local artisans, small furniture makers, and carpenters who had fallen on hard times. He trained them, gave them a space to sell their work, and taught them how to rebuild. Soon, Carter's Furniture wasn't just a store anymore. It was a movement. And then one day, James found himself sitting across from a young man holding a sign that read, "Need work. Anything helps." James pulled up a chair and smiled. "Tell me your story." Because he knew firsthand, sometimes all someone needs is for one person to believe in them.